Mallins. I'm the founder of the London Bartenders Association, and I've been a bartender around 14 years. Started my career in Leicester, moved to London, and then I've done a few bits in the Middle East as well. And my focus at the moment has been on growing the LBA. Kind of Paul. For me, it started over 10 years ago when I was bartending in Leicester, and we set up a Facebook group for the community within
Was that
Leicester.
called LBA as well?
I think it was called Leicester Bartenders. I don't think it had association in there, but so obviously definitely an L at the front. So that group still exists, but obviously I'm not part of that, not working in Leicester. But the idea of that was to bring the community together, but also mainly for training opportunities. So trying to encourage more brands to come to Leicester. So it's a small city, so they're sat in between Nottingham and Birmingham, which get plenty of attention on the bar scene. So it was kind of our way of sort of giving a wave to the brands at the time. Facebook was a very different place as well 10 years ago. Then moving to London, I sort of set up the equivalent. I thought that it would have existed already, being London, but it didn't. And here we are 10.5 years later with 32,000 members and a very active community. But its pillars have always been community, resource and network. Reflective of how the whole industry has changed and how the world is changing, but specifically with the London community. So in March I did something which really changed the dynamic of the group as well, which is turning on post approval. So previously anyone could post at any time, but it just helped me manage the information that was going on there, because at that time, with lockdown especially, there was lots of misinformation going around, people just not knowing and panicking. And it became a very important resource, along with other Facebook groups within the hospitality and bar community across the country. It became a key platform for getting the right information, especially as things every day, every hour, things were changing and evolving. So apart from just the government guidelines and the changes there, it was also a platform that I could help promote people like the Drinks Trust, Hospitality Action and other organisations that were really there to help people who were really in need, who had lost jobs, who needed perhaps some legal advice for issues with their employers, or likewise employees, operators not knowing where they stood with either licensing, also with employees. And there's still lots of unknowns at the moment as things evolve, but it certainly changed the dynamic, because then I had to vet every post coming through, ensuring it was correct information, obviously relevant, and
sensitive to the subject at hand as well.
Absolutely, and sensitive to it as well. So it initially I thought it was going to really increase my workload, but although yes, it means I have to approve posts, and at the moment I run the group on my own. And have done for much of the LBA's history, it's actually made it a more useful place. Although people have to wait a bit longer, that's kind of the compromise for having a slightly more efficient resource in online community. When it comes to individuals needing help, and majority of the time those individuals who reach out to me, it's generally an issue they have with an employer, normally around either getting pay or being sacked unfairly, and I'm able to direct them to the right organisations, the right bit of advice. I'm not a lawyer myself or an HR expert, but so I'm very careful about the information I give. You shouldn't, I say this openly on the group, but I think there's a whole lot of the community, when someone does post about that, they will point to ACAS or the Drinks Trust or Hospitality Action or other sorts of legal advice, referring to the government website. So there's certainly, I would say in the past 6 months or so, a lot more awareness of what the due process needs to be, rather than just shouting about it, just with people's opinions. It's really important that accurate information is given to people, particularly at a time like this, when it is down to if they've got rent to pay, they're trying to have job security, etc. But there are employees that are really terrible employees, they're terrible people. There are also employees that are just very ignorant and don't know quite what the processes are. They need to know, obviously, but there's advice I'm giving to employees as well, in terms of where they need to go and what they should be doing, from a legal and I guess a moral standpoint as well. And with the wider hospitality industry, we've got lots of issues around wellbeing and welfare, and that's something I'm working on a larger project as well.
Would you say that the new sort of angle that you've taken and your new sort of role within the LBA and giving this advice allows people within the industry to see hospitality as a real job, actually, as something that isn't just, you know, suck it up, work the hours? I think you giving this advice and then realising that there are legal requirements and that their job should be respected, does that allow them to kind of see that there's a progression or that they have more of a self-worth really within their role?
Completely. Yeah, I think that's a big part of the conversation around welfare and well-being and career bartending, or careers in frontline hospitality. You know, knowing your rights from the first day you get your job in hospitality, that it's incredibly important. And, you know, if you look at other sectors, other industries where that is the absolute norm, yet the practices aren't the same in hospitality. And it's an attitude change, which is always some of the most difficult things to do certainly within an industry. But certainly highlighting the rights that you have, the services there, and removing stigmas is really, really important, whether it's mental health stigma, but also, you know, I come from a generation, it still happens now, generation of bartenders, where if you work less than 40 hours a week, you label it part-timer. So, you know, we need to stop championing working ourselves to the bone when it comes to hours within bars and restaurants. So Alex Fado-Blanc reached out to me after I did a talk for Imbibe Live over this summer that was on over Zoom, and we essentially worked out that we shared much of the same passions and frustrations and drive for changing attitudes in hospitality, particularly through the troubles we've got in 2020. And we built essentially a welfare portfolio, and Alex has led this from doing his Wrestling Demons campaign of the summer, which was bringing chefs, artists and bartenders together to talk about mental health, then pieces of art around that as well, and that's a campaign we've sort of continued as well. And at its heart, like I kind of spoke about with the LBA, it's always about the community and helping the community. And then we came up with Feed the Conversation, which is sort of, if you like, the umbrella campaign about bringing people together within the hospitality industry, bartenders, servers, chefs, baristas, whoever it might be, brand ambassadors, etc. Because we all go through similar issues and challenges, whether it's work-life balance, whether it's pay, whether it's alcohol abuse, drug abuse, all these kind of things. We need to be better at having these conversations, but also being proactive about the positive change that needs to happen, and that's really what it's all about. And with Cocktails in the City, you know, the community edition, which Andrew Scutts did this year, was an incredible weekend. It was the first time there was an on-trade event on the Friday afternoon, and we did 3 different panel discussions, mostly around mental health and hospitality careers, and we had some great panellists on there. We had Sally Abbey, who's a Michelin-starred chef. We had Will Beckett, one of the founders of Hawksmoor. Then we had Des, who's a veteran bartender, who I'm incredibly proud that he's been able to come on stage and talk about his own battles with mental health. He's been raising money for the Drinks Trust. And Julian DeFerrell, who was a great chair and has a great understanding as well of the industry. Absolutely, mental health, well-being, and just being aware as an operator and having your team aware of what mental health really means. But also, I think getting at least one member of staff trained in mental health awareness training, certainly if you've got a large team, can be really helpful. Work-life balance is absolutely key, and I think, you know, managers need to really take time doing their rotas for their staff, and not just going, that's 1 week, I need this and that, I need this shift covered. You know, you've got to look at either end of those weeks, look at when the people have got their days off, really look at the shift patterns, but also on an individual basis. And I think treating everyone individually and what their needs are, because some people might have families, some people might live miles away, and just having that balance amongst the team, and just being transparent and open about it. You know, having regular conversations not about work with your team, I think is really important. Certainly, as you know, with the rise of small independent bars as well, there's great opportunities for that as an operator, and being inspiring for your own team. I think also business training from the ground up, whether you start as a barback, a glass collector, you need to have some kind of even just entry level business training, whether it's squeezing limes and, you know, understanding if you squeeze too much limes, that's money in the bin if you're wastage. And because I think there's operators that and managers who need to be training the younger generation to eventually take over our own roles. And we know plenty of people that try to open bars and haven't got a clue about how to run a business. I don't think if we do that from the ground up, it's going to take a generation to really make all these differences. But yeah, just to recap, sort of mental health awareness, mental health training, work-life balance, making sure you're engaging your team regularly. I need a fifth one now. Non-alcoholic drinks. End of shift beer is incredibly important. It doesn't have to be alcoholic, and there are some delicious non-alcoholic beers out there at the moment as well. So yeah, the end of work beer is really, really important, but it doesn't have to be loads of shots and alcohol as well. I think we do need to treat alcohol with the respect it deserves. There's plenty of conversation resources about mindful drinking and better drinking, and plenty of brands now doing non-alcoholic versions of their alcoholic products. I'm going to be making a margarita, which was a really poignant drink for me early in my bartending career. It opened my eyes up to what good tequila was, because like a lot of people, I was introduced to tequila with shots and salt and lime and generally pretty poor tequila. So being introduced to this cocktail just really opened my eyes to some really good quality spirits out there. So I'm going to make a classic margarita today using Curado Espadin. So a very simple recipe where we're going to do 1 part of lime juice, so 1 part triple sec, and then 2 parts of the Curado. So I quite like the diversity with the serves in this. We're going to make this one on the rocks today, but obviously you can do it with salt, without salt, do it straight up, or on the rocks as well. I'm going to give this a really good shake, and then just a double strain to get rid of all the ice shards. And there we go. We have 2 Curado Espadin classic margaritas.